She had $255 left in her bank account, new city, empty apartment, air mattress on the floor, and she was standing in front of a shelter cage looking at a Bengal cat that 3 families had already returned, staring back at her like he already knew exactly how this story was going to end. Every logical part of her said walk away. She didn't walk away, and 4 years later, that $255 decision turned out to be the most important one she ever made. She had $255 left in her bank account, not $255 after rent, not $255 after bills, $255 total. First month in a new city, no furniture, no friends, no food in the fridge, and she was standing in front of a shelter cage staring at a Bengal cat that 3 families had already returned, who was staring right back at her like he had been waiting for her specifically and was mildly annoyed it had taken this long. She should have walked away. Every single logical part of her said walk away. She didn't walk away. Jenna had moved to Austin, Texas on a Thursday in early February with 2 duffel bags, a job that started in 5 days, and exactly $340 to last her until her first paycheck. She had found a 3rd-floor apartment that smelled like fresh paint and someone else's old decisions. No couch yet, no kitchen table, an air mattress she had inflated by mouth because the pump was still in a box in her old bedroom 3 states away. She had given herself one rule: survive the first month. Eat cheap, don't spend anything you don't have to, don't do anything reckless. The shelter was 4 blocks from her apartment. She had walked past it twice on the way to the grocery store. On the 3rd day, she walked in, just to look, she told herself, just to feel something warm in a city that didn't know her name yet. The shelter worker, a woman named Claire with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a voice that sounded like she had seen everything twice, walked her through the rows. Dogs first, then cats, and at the very end of the cat wing, in a cage that sat slightly apart from the others like it had been quietly quarantined from the rest of the room, was the Bengal. Spotted coat, gold and black rosette markings so sharp and precise they looked less like fur and more like something painted by hand. Ears like radar dishes, green eyes unblinking, locked onto Jenna with an intensity that made her stop walking mid-step. "That one's been here 11 weeks, Claire said, choosing her words with the careful precision of someone delivering a medical diagnosis. "He's been returned 3 times. First family said he was too intense. Second said he growled at their kids when they moved too fast. Third one," she paused, "third one brought him back without calling, left him in his carrier on a Tuesday morning." Janet crouched down. The Bengal walked to the front of the cage slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world and had simply decided this interaction was worth his attention. He pressed his nose against the metal. He didn't make a sound. He just looked at her. "What's his name?" Jenna asked. "Whatever you want it to be," Claire said quietly. "Nobody's kept him long enough for one to stick." She named him Atlas, and she handed Claire her debit card for the $85 adoption fee, which left her with $255. On the way home, she stopped at the nearest pet store. She stood in the cat food aisle for 9 minutes. She remembers because she counted, trying not to panic, doing the math in her head with the focused desperation of someone diffusing something. Quality dry food formulated for active breeds, $36. Litter box and litter, $28. Food bowl and water dish, $14. She skipped the cat bed. She figured he could share the air mattress. She left the store with $177. Back at the apartment, she opened the carrier door and stepped back. Atlas walked out, sat in the exact center of the empty room, and conducted what could only be described as a formal property assessment. Ceiling, noted. Walls, acceptable. Window, promising. Jenna, under evaluation. Then he walked to the window, jumped up in one fluid, silent motion, and stared down at the street below like he was surveying territory that now, by his own decision, was his. "I know it's not much," Jenna said. Atlas turned and looked at her. Then he crossed the room, sat down directly on her feet, and began to purr, a deep, rolling sound, completely unhurried, like a small engine that had finally found the right gear. That was the first night. The first paycheck came 17 days later. In those 17 days, Jenna spent $38 on food for herself: pasta, eggs, a bag of rice, and a loaf of bread that lasted longer than it had any right to. She spent $0 for entertainment. She walked to work every morning to save on transit, 41 minutes each way. And every single evening, she came home to Atlas. He had developed a system by day 4. He would sit at the front door and wait. The moment she walked in, he would lead her to the kitchen with his tail straight up, the the Bengal equivalent of a formal complaint about the delay, and stand pointedly in front of his food bowl until she acknowledged the situation. She always acknowledged the situation. On day 11, she found a feather wand at a discount store for $7. Atlas destroyed the feather in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She watched him do it. Then he picked up the plastic handle, carried it to the center of the room, and dropped it at her feet like an offering. He had opinions about what constituted a worthy toy. The plastic handle apparently qualified. The feather had been structurally inadequate. She still has the plastic handle. Month 2, something had shifted, not just in the apartment, but in Jenna. She had been lonely in a way she hadn't fully anticipated when she made the decision to move. Not dramatically lonely, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet kind, the kind that lives in the space between finishing dinner and finding something to do with your hands afterwards, the walk to work with nobody to text, the silence of a kitchen at 7 a.m. Atlas fixed that. Not because he was easy. He was not easy. He knocked her only lamp off the nightstand on day 23 and regarded the aftermath with the detached curiosity of someone watching a documentary about a society that had brought its problems on itself. He had very specific feelings about closed doors, which he expressed vocally and at length at 5:47 every morning. He had rearranged her bookshelf twice in ways that made no logical sense, but were clearly intentional. But he was there, constantly, undeniably, specifically there. When she worked late at the kitchen table, he sat on the chair beside her with one paw resting on her forearm, applying just enough weight to remind her he existed. When she ate, he sat across from her and watched with the focused attention of someone who found her genuinely fascinating and was generously choosing not to say so. When she was tired, he pressed the full warmth of his spotted body against her side on the air mattress, later on the real bed, with the quiet certainty of something that had decided she was worth staying close to. 3 families had called him too much, too intense, too complicated. He was all of those things. He was also, without question or condition, entirely hers. Still haven't subscribed? That honestly stings a little. Hit subscribe. Atlas would want you to. Month 3, first vet visit. $122. The vet, a measured woman named Dr. Vasquez, who examined every animal with the same expression of careful, professional interest, pressed Atlas's paws gently and looked up. "He's going to be a substantial animal," she said. "Bengals this frame, probably 14, 15 pounds fully grown. Lean muscle, very high energy." She looked at Jenna. "Are you prepared for that?" Jenna looked at Atlas, who was sitting upright on the examination table with the posture of someone attending a meeting he had not requested but was willing to endure with dignity. "I think so," Jenna said. Dr. Vasquez almost smiled. "Good answer." Month 4, the lamp. New lamp, $24. No remorse was expressed or implied. Month 5, a grooming appointment, $58, because Atlas's coat had developed a density and texture that Jenna's brush could no longer negotiate. The groomer called her midway through. "He's being completely perfect," the woman said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Most Bengals this active are a handful on the table. He's just sitting there, like he's at a spa." Jenna wasn't surprised. Atlas had always known precisely when to deploy charm and when to deploy chaos. The ratio was entirely his to determine. By the end of year 1, Jenna had spent $893 on Atlas. Food, vet visits, a replacement lamp, 2 toys, 1 grooming appointment, and a secondhand cat tree she found for $40 that Atlas immediately claimed as his permanent headquarters and primary surveillance tower. She had also gained something that the $255 in her account that first week could have never have purchased. She had gained Austin, because Atlas had given her a reason to come home every single day, and coming home every day to something that sat at the door and waited, that led her to the kitchen with its tail straight up, that pressed its spotted body against her side at 11 p.m. when the city outside felt too large and too indifferent. That had made Austin feel less like a stranger city and more like hers. Atlas is 4 years old now. 15 pounds of spotted gold and black, green eyes, and absolute certainty about his place in the world, which is specifically the left cushion of the couch, the chair beside Jenna at dinner, and directly on top of whatever Jenna is currently reading. The neighbors in the building know him by name. The woman in the apartment downstairs leaves a treat at the door on his birthday. The man across the hall, who was visibly startled the first time he encountered Atlas in the hallway at 6 a.m., that is an unusual cat, now stops for 4 minutes every morning to have what can only be described as a conversation with him. 3 families returned him. 11 weeks in a shelter without a name that stuck, and a woman with $255, no furniture, and a rule about not doing anything reckless. Who broke the rule? She spent $85 to bring him home. He paid her back in 4 years of never once letting her feel alone in a city that hadn't known her name. Think about that for a moment. $85, less than a dinner for two at a mid-range restaurant, less than a tank of gas in most states, less than a streaming subscription you forgot you had. And yet, that $85 spent on a Thursday afternoon in February with $255 to her name and an air mattress waiting for her at home turned out to be the most important financial decision Jenna ever made. Not because it was smart, not because it was logical, because it was true. There is a version of that day where Jenna does the math, puts her debit card back in her wallet, and walks out of that shelter alone, where she goes back to her empty apartment, eats pasta by herself, and saves the $255 for something practical. That version of Jenna survives the first month just fine. She figures out Austin, she makes friends eventually, she builds a life. But she builds it without Atlas sitting at the door when she comes home, without 15 pounds of spotted fur pressing against her side at 11 p.m. when the city outside felt too big and too indifferent. Atlas was returned 3 times. 3 families decided he was too much, too intense, too complicated, too wild at his edges. And maybe they were right for them, because Atlas was not a background cat. He was not something you kept in the corner and fed twice a day. He was a presence. He demanded to be seen, to be spoken to be included. In the way that some animals understand things that go beyond instinct or training, he understood Jenna from the moment she crouched down at that cage and stayed. While every other visitor had turned and walked away in under 2 minutes, she stayed for 47 seconds and looked back. He made the same decision about her. Some things you cannot put a price on, but sometimes the most important things in your life start with a debit card with $255 left on your name and a choice that makes no logical sense at all. Was Jenna reckless, or was she right? Tell me in the comments.